This is a brief overview of the application controller pattern. Now here we have a class diagram of what this application controller pattern will look like. The application controller has a map of different commands that it knows how to invoke. Each of those commands will have this interface. It will implement the interface, which is a contract saying that any handler or command that this application controller will have this method inside it, handle it. That way, the application controller knows that each of those commands will have that method and it can invoke that method. Each implementation of this interface, in this case target here, will have its own method with a different thing that it's performing. So your application will call the application controller saying, I need this command. It will look it up from the HashMap, pull it back, and invoke the command. You can see that in more detail in this sequence diagram down here. This is demonstrating a login. So it gets the username and the password, and then it asks the application controller, please log in. So that's the name of the command, and then the data that that command will need. Here the application controller says, okay, I need to get the login handler, and it goes out to the map and says, get me that login handler, and it returns it. Then the application controller invokes that method that we contracted through the interface to have. So handle it, and it passes in the data, the username and the password, and that login handler will then do its job. And that implementation is not demonstrated in this diagram, but it shows you the general flow of an application using the application controller pattern. Note, this is a very extensible and flexible pattern to use in your coding, because if you have something new that you need to do, you simply create a new handler and add that handler to your application controller. So it makes it very easy to extend or build out your application as you go. Now let's take a look at an example of some code using the application controller pattern. First thing I'm going to show you is the interface that I've created. It's very similar to the one in the diagram. It's a handler interface with a method called handleIt. Now there's two different hash maps that you need to be aware of, two different kinds in this application. The first kind is the data that each of these handlers will take in. And it's got a string to tell it the label or the name of the data, and then the data itself. That's the first kind of hash map. The second one is on the application controller itself, which is a map or a list of the commands that it knows how to handle. Each of those commands is a handler. That's the interface that we were just looking at. So it will have a name of the command to perform and the handler for that command. So as I create my application controller, I'm putting in the commands that it knows how to handle. This application is a library of sorts, so it can display a menu of things that the user can do, display the books that are in the library already, or add a book to the library. And each of these handlers implements that handler interface and will have that handleIt method. When you call the application controller, you will tell it to do a command and give it a command key or a command name. That key needs to be one of these commands that you've added to your command map. Then the data that you're passing in is the data that we contracted with the interface to be able to handle. Hash map of objects and a string for the name. So when you call this do command, it will try to go out to our map of commands and get the command using that string key. And if it doesn't get a command back, then it will throw an error so the user knows that's not a valid command. But if it does get it back, it will run that handle it method that we contracted to have, passing in the data needed. Looking at a handler, this display menu one, the handle it method is here, the data is here. The only data that we're passing in is a scanner, so you can get input from the user. And it displays the menu and it gets the selection for the user to know what to do next. So looking at the application itself, we create first our application controller. And it has that, the act of creating it will give it that list of commands that it knows how to do because that's part of the constructor in the application controller. It also creates a scanner that we'll use throughout the application and a new library of books. Now, since this is demo code, the library comes with a whole bunch of books already in it, but you can still add to it. And as you go through, the controller has different things that it can do. And as the user puts in, I want to do action 1, it'll display the books or display the menu and the book. So that's the flow of this application controller pattern. Now, to show you this application, to see that it actually works, first thing that's displayed is that menu. Let's display the books that are on there. There's a number of books in here. And it displays the menu again. So it kind of loops until we choose the exit choice. So if we were to add a book, we'll just give it a fake author tester. And fake title, testing, application controller pattern, a series, let's call it Java, and a genre. Not really a good genre in here for this, but we'll just put 6 for now. Now, if we display books again, we can see our new book was added to the library. And that is the application controller pattern.